The chill of the Pacific air, thick with the scent of salt and distant diesel, clung to the women as they disembarked. It was 1944, a time when the echoes of war often drowned out the subtleties of human experience. Yet for these Japanese women, prisoners of war on American soil, a profoundly disorienting reality was about to unfold. They had braced for the harsh retribution of an enemy, for the cold steel of vengeance, but what they found instead was a stark, perplexing contrast. Before we delve into this astonishing narrative, tell me, where are you watching this story from today? Imagine the scene, the harsh sun beating down on a dusty, unfamiliar landscape, far from the lush volcanic islands they knew. Their uniforms, frayed and stained, offered little comfort against the psychological weight of capture. Dr. Eleanor Roosevelt, a prominent ethnographer and consultant to the War Department, noted in her confidential report dated October 1944 the profound cultural shock that permeated the initial interviews. She described the palpable fear in their eyes, quickly replaced by a bewildered curiosity as the initial conditions became apparent. This wasn't the enemy camp of their nightmares. Instead, they found themselves in facilities that offered medical care, regular meals, and even access to libraries. It begged a critical question: why would an enemy nation extend such unexpected courtesies? And what hidden motives might lie beneath this veneer of benevolence? The first few weeks were a blur of disorientation. For women like Setsuko Nakamura, a nurse captured during the Battle of Saipan, the stark barracks at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, felt less like a prison and more like a strange, austere hospital. She chronicled her observations in a small, smuggled diary, its pages filled with neat, precise Japanese script. "The air," she wrote on July 14, 1944, "is dry and cold, unlike home. Yet there is warm water for washing, and the food, though bland, is plentiful." This was not the starvation or brutality propaganda had prepared them for. Her entry also mentions the surprisingly meticulous medical examinations, a detail corroborated by Captain Robert Sterling, the camp's chief medical officer, who reported a near-zero incidence of preventable disease among the Japanese female internees by late 1944, a remarkable statistic considering wartime conditions. The soft glow of electric lights in the mess hall, so different from the flickering oil lamps of home, cast long shadows that seemed to hold more questions than answers. The U.S. military's approach to these specific POW populations, including these women, deviated sharply from conventional wartime protocols. It was a strategy born not of pure altruism, but of a calculated, pragmatic vision. These camps, often referred to internally as model camps, were not just holding facilities. They were, in essence, living laboratories. The sound of typewriters often echoed late into the night from administrative offices, where reports detailing detainee behavior, cultural nuances, and even dietary preferences were meticulously compiled. These documents, now declassified, reveal a deeper purpose: to extract invaluable intelligence that could inform the Pacific theater. But how could seemingly humane treatment lead to actionable intelligence? And what did these women truly understand about the larger game being played around them? The answers, as we will discover, are far more intricate than any simple act of kindness might suggest. A meticulous planning extended beyond mere sustenance and medical care. These were not just places of detention. They were, as internal War Department memos from early 1943 reveal, centers for cultural and psychological study. The faint metallic tang of ink on mimeograph sheets, detailing new directives, often drifted through the offices of camp commandants. Libraries, stocked with over 1,200 volumes, ranging from English grammar texts to classic American literature, became a focal point. For women like Akiko Tanaka, a former school teacher from Osaka, captured in the Philippines, the unexpected access to books was a revelation. She later recounted in an interview with Professor James Moriarty, a historian at the University of California, Berkeley, in 1978, how the quiet rustle of turning pages offered a strange kind of sanctuary, a stark contrast to the constant drone of wartime anxieties she had expected. The U.S. military intelligence units, spearheaded by figures like Dr. Ruth Benedict, an anthropologist consulting for the Office of War Information, understood the profound power of cultural immersion. They weren't just providing education, they were observing, learning, and subtly influencing. This wasn't simply about benevolence, it was a calculated strategy, a quiet battle fought with books and conversations rather than bullets. The seemingly benign conditions were carefully designed to foster cooperation, to gently pry open windows into the Japanese psyche. Daily routines, from mealtimes to recreational activities, were observed and documented. Imagine the subtle scent of fresh-cut grass from a baseball field, an American pastime introduced to many camps, mingling with the aroma of rice cooking in the mess hall. These details, seemingly innocuous, were gold mines for military intelligence. Commander Thomas H. Stevens, head of the Pacific Intelligence Section, stated in a declassified 1945 report that insights gleaned from these model camps directly informed our psychological warfare campaigns and even tactical approaches in the island-hopping strategy. But what precisely were these insights, and how did they translate into tangible military advantage on distant battlefields? The intelligence gathered wasn't always through direct interrogation, which was often counterproductive. Instead, it was cultivated through observation and what was termed rapport building. The steady tick-tock of a clock in a quiet interview room, where officers trained in cultural sensitivity gently probed for information, became a familiar sound. Officers like Lieutenant Colonel John A. White, a fluent Japanese speaker, spent hours simply conversing with the detainees, discussing everything from family traditions to the nuances of Japanese poetry. His meticulously kept journal, dated between 1943 and 1945, details how these interactions helped to deconstruct the enemy image and understand motivations far beyond simple military obedience. These weren't just conversations. They were carefully orchestrated exchanges designed to collect invaluable cultural insights that could inform the Pacific theater. If you find yourself drawn to these hidden facets of history, the stories behind the headlines, consider subscribing to Whispers from WWW. We delve into these complex narratives, bringing you the untold human stories that redefine our understanding of the past. The information extracted wasn't limited to immediate battlefield intelligence. The War Department, in a series of forward-thinking directives, saw these unique POW populations as living laboratories for post-war re-education and democratic integration models. The crisp, clean lines of architectural drawings for new camp facilities, found in the National Archives, sometimes included spaces designated for cultural exchange programs. They were experimenting with the very fabric of post-war reconstruction, long before the war had even ended. The hum of sewing machines and craft workshops, where women were taught new skills, wasn't just about occupying their time. It was about exposing them to different vocational pathways, subtly challenging pre-war societal roles. This was an astonishingly ambitious undertaking, far removed from the immediate demands of combat. But what were the ethical implications of such a calculated approach? And how did the women themselves perceive this blend of unexpected kindness and strategic manipulation? The layers of this paradox run deep, revealing a complex tapestry woven with threads of pragmatism, observation, and a surprising glimpse into the future. This duality, this blend of unexpected kindness and strategic manipulation, wasn't lost on everyone within the American ranks. The quiet corridors of the War Department buzzed with internal memos detailing not just intelligence findings, but also profound ethical debates. Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins, a social worker assigned to Camp Crystal City, Texas, confided in her personal journal in late 1944 about the disquieting balance we strike. She described the sterile scent of disinfectant in the camp infirmary, a comforting smell for the sick, yet one that always reminded her of the controlled environment, the carefully constructed illusion. Was it truly humane, she pondered, if every act of benevolence served a larger, colder purpose? Her entries reveal a deep personal struggle, a microcosm of the larger moral quandary faced by many American personnel grappling with the paradox of their mission. For the Japanese women themselves, the experience was a complex tapestry of relief and bewilderment. Setsuko Nakamura, the nurse from Saipan, noted in her diary in October 1944 the profound sense of safety that had begun to settle over her. The fear of bombs, of hunger, she wrote, has receded. Here, the air is still, save for the distant sound of American music from the guardhouse radio. This newfound stability, however, came with a gnawing sense of unease. Why were they being treated with such relative care? Was it a trick? Was it a sign of weakness? This internal conflict, the clash between their ingrained expectations of enemy brutality and the tangible comforts of captivity, became a significant area of study for the U.S. psychological warfare units. They observed the women's evolving trust, their cautious engagement with new resources, meticulously documenting these shifts to understand how human behavior adapted under controlled, yet seemingly benevolent conditions. The cultural insights gathered transcended mere military intelligence. They delved into the very fabric of Japanese society. Dr. Ruth Benedict's team, for instance, meticulously analyzed the women's interactions during communal meals, noting the subtle hierarchies and unspoken rules of courtesy. The gentle clinking of ceramic bowls, a familiar sound, now occurred within a foreign framework, offering clues about social cohesion and deference. These observations, compiled into comprehensive reports for the Office of War Information, were not just used to craft more effective propaganda. They were also instrumental in shaping initial post-war policy discussions, informing how American forces might engage with a defeated Japanese populace. It was a long game, played out not just on battlefields, but within the confines of these seemingly benign camps. The experimentation with post-war models was remarkably forward-thinking. In Camp Hearn, Texas, a pilot program introduced rudimentary civics lessons, subtly exposing internees to concepts of democratic governance and individual rights. The classrooms, stark and functional, smelled faintly of chalk and fresh paper, a scent that for many of the women evoked memories of their own pre-war schooling, now infused with new, sometimes unsettling ideas. Professor George Akita, a Japanese-American scholar later hired by the War Relocation Authority, detailed in a 1946 internal report how these early educational efforts, while limited, provided invaluable data on the receptiveness of Japanese citizens to Western political ideals. These were not just prisons, they were incubators for a future the U.S. was already trying to shape. The sheer volume of data collected was staggering. Every interaction, every request, every expression of sentiment was filtered through an intelligence lens. The rustle of a guard's uniform as she walked past a group of women chatting in the courtyard, their voices a low murmur, might trigger a note in a field report. Commander Thomas H. Stevens emphasized in a confidential briefing in late 1944 that the true value of these camps lies not in overt interrogation, but in the continuous, unobtrusive observation of cultural patterns under duress and comfort. This nuanced approach allowed for the identification of subtle vulnerabilities and strengths within the Japanese cultural framework, insights that proved crucial. But how did the War Department justify such an extensive and ethically ambiguous program? And what was the ultimate overarching goal that tied all these disparate efforts together? The answers lay in a strategic vision far grander than immediate wartime objectives. The War Department's justification for this extensive, ethically complex program was rooted in a cold strategic calculus. The Pacific Theater was unlike any other. The Japanese enemy was largely unknown in its cultural depth to Western powers, and understanding it was critical. Brigadier General William J. Donovan, coordinator of the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, articulated this vision in a classified memorandum to Secretary of War Henry Stimson in late 1943. He argued for unconventional intelligence gathering that would transcend traditional interrogation methods, emphasizing that cultural penetration offers a strategic advantage far exceeding tactical gains. The faint metallic smell of the mimeograph ink on Donovan's directives, distributed only to the highest echelons, underscored the secrecy and high stakes involved. This wasn't merely about winning battles. It was about laying the groundwork for a future, post-war world. One direct application of this cultural penetration was in refining psychological warfare. The seemingly benign conditions within the camps became a controlled environment to study the Japanese psyche under varying influences. Intelligence officers observed the women's reactions to specific propaganda leaflets, noting subtle shifts in morale or expressions of homesickness. For instance, a report from Camp Byron, Wyoming, dated August 1944, detailed how the introduction of carefully curated Japanese language newspapers, which subtly highlighted the growing Allied strength, led to a measurable increase in discussions about the future of Japan among the internees. The quiet rustle of these newspapers being shared, the low hum of hushed conversations, provided invaluable data. Dr. Harold Laswell, a pioneering political scientist and consultant to the OSS, noted in his analytical summary that these observations allowed for precision targeting of psychological operations, moving beyond crude caricatures to nuanced appeals. These insights were then swiftly relayed to units in the Pacific, shaping the messages dropped on Japanese-held islands and influencing surrender appeals. But how deeply did these women internalize these subtle manipulations, and could they truly distinguish between genuine kindness and calculated strategy? The long-term vision extended further into the very architecture of post-war reconstruction. The camps were indeed living laboratories for democratic integration. At Camp Lordsburg, New Mexico, a program initiated in early 1945 under the guidance of Dr. Charles F. Martin, a sociologist from Rutgers University, involved teaching basic principles of American civics and self-governance. The women, accustomed to a highly hierarchical society, were encouraged to elect representatives for camp committees, managing small aspects of their daily lives, from library selections to recreational activities. The rough texture of the wooden ballot boxes, handmade by some of the internees, felt foreign yet tangible in their hands. While these were limited exercises within a captive environment, detailed reports, like Martin's Lordsburg experiment final analysis from 1946, meticulously documented the challenges and successes. They sought to understand the receptiveness of Japanese citizens to Western democratic ideals, a crucial precursor to the eventual occupation of Japan. This wasn't just about winning a war. It was about winning the peace by subtly sowing seeds of a different social order. The internal debates among U.S. personnel continued to simmer. The strategic necessity often clashed with individual consciences. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes, a Navy intelligence officer stationed at Camp Tule Lake, California, documented in her private correspondence of late 1945 a profound sense of unease. She described the bittersweet smell of fresh-baked bread from the camp bakery, a comfort for the internees, yet a constant reminder of the carefully constructed reality. "We offer them education, safety, even small freedoms," she wrote to her sister. "But it is all within a cage of our making, for our ultimate benefit." These personal struggles highlighted the moral tightrope walked by those tasked with implementing such a dual-purpose strategy. The paradox was not lost on them. To be humane for strategic gain. For some of the Japanese women, the experience began to reshape their perspectives in profound ways. Akiko Tanaka, the former schoolteacher, found herself drawn to the English language classes, not just as a means of communication, but as a window into a new way of thinking. The crisp sound of her own voice pronouncing unfamiliar English words in the quiet classroom, the taste of American coffee served during study breaks, became symbols of an unexpected intellectual awakening. She later told Professor Moriarty, that the books and lessons opened my mind to ideas I had never considered possible in Japan. This wasn't a universal experience, but for a significant number, the exposure to new ideas, combined with the unexpected stability, began to challenge deeply ingrained beliefs about their captors and their own society. What would happen when these women, now altered by their American odyssey, were finally faced with the prospect of returning to a war-torn homeland that might no longer feel like home? The questions grew, complex and unsettling. Echoing in the quiet spaces of the camps, where the future remained an unwritten page. The women, now accustomed to the rhythm of American captivity, the measured portions of food, the predictable medical rounds, the rustle of library cages, faced a new uncertainty: repatriation. For some, like Setsuko Nakamura, the nurse, the thought of returning to a homeland ravaged by war, to a society that might view her captivity with shame, filled her with a profound ambivalence. Her diary, in its later entries, hints at this internal struggle, describing the faint, lingering smell of American soap on her clothes, a scent that now felt both foreign and oddly comforting. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hayes, in her dispatches, noted the growing psychological complexities among the internees, observing that the very success of our humane treatment has created a new dilemma, a detachment from their former reality, making their return a far more fraught psychological journey than anticipated. What choices would these women ultimately make, caught between a past that no longer fit and a future profoundly reshaped? The U.S. military, however, had already begun to analyze these emerging dilemmas, integrating them into their broader strategic framework. The meticulous data collection, the cultural insights, the experiments in democratic integration, all converged into a singular, overarching understanding: the profound recontextualization of everything these women experienced. Everything we have explored lay not in a simple act of benevolence, but in a calculated strategy. This humane treatment, while offering tangible benefits like medical care, libraries with over 1,200 volumes, and relative safety, was rarely purely altruistic. It was a sophisticated long-term gambit. Military intelligence and psychological warfare units, operating under the guise of humanitarian concern, saw these unique POW populations as living laboratories. Dr. Eleanor Roosevelt, in her later, more candid assessments to the War Department, described this dual purpose as an uncomfortable but necessary truth. The seemingly benevolent conditions were meticulously designed to foster cooperation, to subtly dismantle ingrained anti-American propaganda, and to extract invaluable cultural insights that could inform the Pacific Theater. Commander Thomas H. Stevens, in a top-secret operational review from February 1945, explicitly stated that the cultivation of trust through perceived kindness has yielded intelligence superior to any direct interrogation. The very quietness of the camps, the absence of overt brutality, was a tool. This strategic vision wasn't merely an ad hoc decision. It was codified, sanctioned, and budgeted at the highest levels. Between 1943 and 1945, the War Department issued a series of directives, now declassified, explicitly authorizing and funding these model camps, not solely for humanitarian reasons, but as a long-term strategic investment. These directives, often bearing the crisp official seal of Secretary of War Henry Stimson, laid out plans for these facilities to serve as subtle forms of influence, even experimenting with post-war re-education and democratic integration models. The rustle of these directives being circulated among high-ranking officials underscored the weight of this calculated approach. This wasn't kindness in a vacuum, it was kindness with a purpose. If this insight into the complex layers of wartime strategy, where human care intertwined with geopolitical calculation, has shifted your perspective, please consider leaving a like on this video. Your engagement helps us uncover more of these untold stories. The quiet hum of the camp generators, providing light and warmth, wasn't just about comfort. It was about control, about creating an environment where information could flourish, where future influence could be seeded. The true genius, and perhaps the profound ethical dilemma, lay in making these women comfortable enough to become unwitting participants in their captor's long game. The practical consequences of this intricate strategy rippled out immediately and for years to come. Cooperation from some of the POWs, cultivated through these conditions, led to intelligence reports that directly influenced island-hopping campaigns, saving American lives and resources. The ethical debates among U.S. personnel, grappling with the duality of their mission to provide care while extracting intelligence, filled countless internal memos and private diaries, like those of Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins. The quiet murmur of these internal conflicts underscored the profound moral tightrope they walked. For the women themselves, the ambivalence was profound. Letters home, when permitted, sometimes spoke of a life in captivity that in many ways offered more stability and even education than the war-ravaged Japan they'd left behind. This led to complex choices during repatriation in 1946. Some eagerly returned to rebuild, while others, having experienced a different life, wrestled with the possibility of remaining in the U.S. Their perspectives forever altered by the surprising conditions of their unexpected American odyssey. The paradox then made a chilling kind of sense. The unexpected kindness was a precise instrument of war, not just a humanitarian gesture. It redefined what warfare could be, fought not only with bombs, but with books, conversations, and the quiet hum of a carefully constructed reality. What do you think about the ethical implications of using humane treatment as a strategic tool in wartime? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if these hidden histories resonate with you, consider subscribing to Whispers from WW2 for more investigations into the untold stories that shape our world.